Hello, and welcome to episode 87 of TBR, the To Be Read podcast, where we talk about the books we love and the topics that interest us. I'm Patrick Stemp, and with me, as always, are Michael Ronn. How are you, Michael?
Great, Patrick. How are you?
Good. And John L. Monk. How you doing, John?
I'm sick, Patrick. I've been sick since Friday.
But not too sick to come on the show and talk about books, so that's good.
The show must go on.
So this week we're going to be talking about our first sort of book of the month that we all decided to read together, and that is The Rook by Daniel O'Malley. It will be a spoiler-filled discussion, so if you haven't read it, listen at your own peril, I guess, although we're hoping that you will listen and then want to read it. So, it's tough to walk that line. So first of all, we will talk about the books that we've been reading over the past week, assuming anyone was reading anything other than The Rook, finishing it up. So did you guys get any reading done other than finishing up this book, Michael?
A little bit. I mentioned that I was reading the My Beloved World by Sonia Sotomayor, which is she's the first Latina Supreme Court justice here in the United States, and so I actually had another book club for work that I had to do because of that. So I finished that up, and it was interesting. It reads like a political autobiography. Have any of you guys read Barack Obama's autobiography?
No.
Dreams of My Father. I was going to say it reads exactly like that. So it was interesting about it is that she, kind of like Obama did, she spoke like she spoke into a recorder, and then someone took that and then transcribed what she had spoken into the actual book. So I just think that's a really interesting way to write a book because I felt like when I was reading it, it felt like her voice. So I thought that was pretty cool. So yeah, I read that, and then I just had to finish up The Rook. So that was pretty much my week this time around.
Okay. How about you, John?
In addition to The Rook, I had read about half of 61 Ways to Sell Your Nonfiction book by Steve Scott. Because my wife and I are working on a nonfiction book. It's not writing related, and we don't I don't really know how to sell nonfiction. I figure it's easier than fiction. Keywords will actually work. But I wanted to see what he had to say, and it's actually worth the read for anybody out there interested in selling a nonfiction book. So
it's a good book. I've read that as well. I like Steve Scott's books. I think they're really helpful. That's probably one of my top ones, along with Writing Habits Mastery. If you've read that.
Oh no, I haven't read it.
Yeah, that's a great book too, by Steve Scott.
Okay. Cool. So my reading for the week, I read a book by Brett Battles, who's an author that I haven't heard of before. Have either of you guys read any of his stuff?
No, but I love his book covers.
Yeah. So I read a book of his called Rewinder. It's the first part in a time travel series, and it takes place in a world that sort of a world that kind of veered along a different historical path than ours did. So Britain is still kind of in charge of everything. China's still out there, and Russia, some of the big ones, but America never became America. It's still ruled by the king, and there is time travel. There is so it's a very society is sort of very cased. You sort of, people have levels, like you're a level 8 or a level 7 or a 6, mm-hmm. and people don't generally rise above their level. And they take tests at the end of high school to kind of dictate what their career will be for the rest of their lives. Usually it ends up being sort of the same thing that their parents are doing. But the main character in this book gets pulled into a secret organization that's kind of only the people within the organization and the king even know that this place exists. But basically what they do is they look into people's sort of family histories. They verify them by going back in time and making sure that if someone says that they're the 9th, cousin to some duke or something, that it's actually true. And of course it's time travel, so everything gets wildly out of control, and the main character causes some things to go very wrong and has to figure out how to fix them. So I won't ruin it by getting into any more of the details, but it was a it was a really fun read. It was, I think it was a BookBub that I was sort of where I found this book. Picked it up. They're in his books. These books, this series, are in Kindle Unlimited. So if you're taking part in that, you can read them for free. I really enjoyed the first one. I've already downloaded the second one. Destroyer, I think it's called. And I believe there probably will be a third. I'm not sure. I really like his writing style. I'm going to have to check out some of his other stuff when I get it back around to it, with all the other stuff that I already have on my reading list. But yeah, so if you enjoyed time travel, it's a great, fun read. It's Brett Battles' Rewinder.
Yeah, I stumbled across that a couple of times and wondered what that was about. That particular cover was one of the ones that I sent my book designer for Android Paradox because
Okay.
I loved like the style of it. So I'll have to pick that one up. That sounds really interesting.
Yeah,
It's actually it's a 47 North book, by the way. So he's an indie, and he got picked up by the Amazon imprint. So that's quite an honor.
Yeah, he's written quite a bit. I mean, I think he's got 20 or more books out in different series. I've never heard of him before this BookBub, so BookBub works. I found something that I enjoyed. So let's see. So that's my reading for the week, and we can move on to our chat about the Rook. So again, that's the Rook by Daniel O'Malley. This is a book from 2012. A book that I read back in 2012 and have anxiously been awaiting the sequel ever since, which is supposed to come out June or July this year, assuming it doesn't get pushed back again. It has been pushed back a bunch of times. It's got 4.3 stars on Amazon with 573 reviews, which is pretty good. So the big question is, did you both enjoy the book?
I did. I enjoyed it very much.
Did you both finish the book?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
And I enjoyed it too.
Will you be reading the sequel? Will be another big.
Yeah, when it comes out.
I don't know.
I would read it.
I don't know. I have to wonder how. It depends. See, I do have some quibbles,
Okay.
and I don't see how the quibbles can last into the next book based on how the first one was made.
Okay.
I don't know if you want to get into it.
I'm sure we can.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
And
basically, oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, I was just going to say, with the amount of time it's taken this guy to write the sequel, because I mean, it doesn't take a publisher that long. I get the sense that part of the reason the book kept getting pushed back was due to his writing speed. I don't think he turned it in on time. That's just the sense I get. I could be completely wrong, but he seems to write about as fast as George R.R. Martin. So
He's got a day job. He works as like some government dude.
he's in Australia. He works for like the transportation board or something like that.
He fixes their road.
So I guess what we can tell our listeners what this book is about. Why don't I read the little blurb on the back of the book just to kind of get it going, so that while we're talking about the book, people at least know what it's about. So my first sort of next question for you guys would be, how do you pronounce the main character's name?
Miffy.
Sorry, Miffany?
Yeah. Because it said that it was like Tiffany. It rhymed with Tiffany because it's
Sure.
Welsh, right?
Is that how you read it too, John?
Miffany, yeah.
Okay,
I mean,
good.
he did have a pronunciation guide in the beginning, which was probably an indicator that they probably ought to had a easier to say name. In fact, he was very fascinated with really hard to pronounce things, and I almost wonder if maybe he was sort of tapping into the Hogwarts kind of funny names that she was sort of going for with his own little slant, or if he just absolutely loves Welsh type things and strange things about language. I mean, he's a writer. Writers love language, so.
Yeah, it's a funny thing because I know I struggled with this when I first read the book, where it's distracting actually. Like where every single time your eye catches her name, a little part of your brain is trying to figure out, okay, is it Mfanwy? It's Miffany. It can pull you out of the story a little bit, but so that's one weird thing here. But so the little blurb: Miffany Thomas awakens in a London park surrounded by dead bodies. With her memory gone, she must trust the instructions left by her former self in order to survive. She quickly learns that she is a Rook, a high-level operative in a secret agency that protects the world from supernatural threats. But there is a mole inside the organization, and this person wants her dead. Battling to save herself, Mythony will encounter a person with 4 bodies, a woman who can enter her dreams, children transformed into deadly fighters, and a terrifyingly vast conspiracy. Suspenseful and hilarious, The Rook is an outrageously imaginative debut for readers who like their espionage with a dollop of purple slime.
Huh.
So that's a good introduction to the book.
Yeah, that's a very encompassing, it's almost a spoilerific introduction in a way. Like
A
it
little
really
bit.
and it covers everything just about.
Kind of lets us off the hook.
Yeah.
The Rook lets us off the hook. All right.
So the organization that Mythony works for is called the Chakay. Is that how you guys would pronounce it? So this is another thing where the name of the
That's one that kind of threw
organization.
me off a little bit. They mentioned how to pronounce it when
Yeah.
you first start talking about it, but it just didn't stick with me. Chickay or Chickwe, yeah.
So that's
Yeah,
another.
Dave.
So again, it's another little weird thing. But aside from that, let's see. John, you said you had some quibbles. And we can start.
Yeah. Well, it's actually a quibble wrapped inside of a compliment. One of the things I loved about the book was the way that he introduced backstory. He introduced it by basically the woman, she's going to lose her memory. She knows she's going to lose her memory because all these like psychics or these like prophecies or whatever. People approach her on the street and say, "Oh, you're going to lose your memory in a week," and then they walk away, or a month or whatever it was, or some time. And the woman, she's freaking out. She's going to lose her memory. So rather than just be a victim, she starts writing all the stuff that she wants herself to know after she loses her memory. So she's going to kind of wake up, oh my God, I don't have a memory. And then she's going to look in her pocket and say, hey, this is a note about what just happened. And you'll find the rest of the notes in this big folder, in this locker somewhere. And she's given like a choice. You can go off and live your life peacefully, or you can, keep on doing my job, defending the realm against supernatural horrors. And of course, the main character is brave and wonderful, and she decides to kind of do that. So the compliment and wrapped in a riddle, enigma, or whatever. It was a great way to introduce backstory, and I expected it to stop at some point. So there was an awful lot of it. And the funny thing is, and this is almost something you can't really ding him for too much, but it was all written in italics.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have to wear glasses to read. It happened when I turned 40. So I kept on tapping the hardback that I'm reading, waiting for the fonts to get bigger. So when I read the italics, it was right on the cusp of my ability to read it. So I had trouble reading it. I read it and everything. It's just I was like, okay, and I was reading along. Whew, we're out of the italics. So there was a lot of italics.
It's interesting you mentioned that. I wonder if I'm pretty sure italics are probably one of the things that make it hard for dyslexic readers.
Right.
And I know that they even have some fonts available on the e-readers that are specifically built in such a way that they're better for dyslexia, that it's easier for people to read. But yeah, so italics I would think would be something that could throw people off for sure.
Yeah, they're harder to read, and I think italics for me are harder to read as well. Yeah, I did notice that too.
And the italics,
there was a lot of italics in this one.
Right. So I almost think that he should have just written it like when you get to an italic section, just make it all regular kind of righty stuff, and then just put a nice header at the top saying, back in the past, or something like that.
Well, you already know it's a letter because it's, starts with "Dear me" or "Dear you"
Exactly.
in a new chapter. So maybe to trust the reader to be smart enough to realize that what they're reading is one of the letters. I found the letter. I really do like that way of kind of telling backstory. It makes total sense in a story like this. I do find that the letters are a little too storytelling. You would and it works, but you would expect sometimes it's a little too much. Where you would expect her. She's a very meticulous person. She's basically an accountant, and she gets a little deep into the storytelling in these letters rather than just kind of giving herself the facts. Now, he is telling a story here, so that it works. But it is also a little, you kind of think like, well, she probably wouldn't write these letters quite in this way, but yeah, I'll give him a break on that.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I thought that was particularly effective, and I think the reason for that is because the opening of the book was so good, and that you have no idea what's going on, right? And I love the opening, but I think that you kind of alluded earlier, John, like when they're talking about, she's going to lose her memory, and I thought that was a little heavy-handed how that happened. Like I guess for me that I couldn't believe that. Like normally you can suspend your disbelief, but I just how they did that, I just had a hard time.
I will
accepting
say
that.
too that the trope of a main character starting a story with no memory of who they are, the
Right.
whole amnesia thing, is kind of getting old.
Yeah.
Um,
But it worked in this book. I just don't like the way they gave her the amnesia. I just felt like there could have been more cohesion there. Like some guy on the street walks up to you and says you're going to lose your memory, and oh no, you start freaking out. I don't know. I mean, it was a
well,
couple of people that
it
said it
wasn't
to
just
her.
one guy, and
It wasn't just one guy.
the way she lost her memory, I think, made sense.
Yeah.
Which you don't find out how that happened until almost the end of the book. There were some weird things. It's funny. So one of the things that stood out for me, and I'm going to say this too. I mean, I think we all enjoyed this book, but it's not much of a discussion if we just say, yeah, it was really cool. And TBR lasts 10 minutes. I think we're we're going to be picky. But so one of the things that stood out for me, and again with spoilers, is there's a character that they capture early in the book named Van Syok. Again, if I'm pronouncing that right, if you guys remember him.
Yeah.
And when they go to the hotel to acquire this guy, they have like footage of the acquisition happening inside the hotel room, and I'm thinking, where the hell is this camera? Like, they don't put cameras inside hotel rooms, and it's never like one sentence, where he maybe explained that they had slipped one of those, little wire cameras in through the ducts or something, because without that, I'm reading it going like, is this camera just like randomly placed in this hotel room that they can see what's happening in the room? Because that's the way it was written. Because they were watching the footage after the fact.
Right.
Where the hell did this footage come from?
I assumed it was just like a sting, like a typical watching cops on TV, prostitute sting,
But
they
they're
knew
watching.
he was staying there. They snuck in. They put a camera. They got out.
Right, but without that just one line explaining how a camera got into that room.
I filled it in.
It's yeah.
Well,
They
it
did
is
the
the
work.
Shike, so it's magic, right? I mean, they
Yeah.
do some
Yeah.
pretty supernatural things in the book.
So what else?
I don't know about you guys, but is it just me, or was the Rook Gestalt? Is that how you guys pronounce that? Gestalt?
Yeah.
Was it just me, or was that just very disturbing? Like that whole idea. Like basically it's this character that is a hive mind, and so it has 4 different bodies, and I don't think that really. I don't know if one of the bodies really ever was the main body, but they all kind
shares.
of.
It's
Yeah,
like
share.
one mind
One
that
mind, 4
shares and
bodies.
controls 4 bodies equally, and it can
Yeah.
pull the mind out of a body. It can control different bodies at different parts of the world at the same time.
Right.
And,
Yeah, like it could be talking to you and doing something, and the other 3 bodies are doing something totally different across the world. Yeah, I just thought that was really interesting,
was.
and unique. Yeah, and I guess it was kind of clear in the beginning that this was going to be a bad guy. I mean, I guess that was pretty obvious, that Gestalt was the bad guy. But I just thought it was really interesting. I don't know. I kind of wish that there would have been more with that character.
I didn't like how he just
instead of
went
killing him off.
Yeah, well, they didn't actually kill him off.
he can still be. He might be in the sequel.
He might be, but all 4 of the bodies were killed though.
No. I think he only had like 2 of them killed.
Yeah, a couple of the bodies are dead. A couple of them are still alive.
Yeah.
He's
Well,
got the
I-
Without getting too spoilery, yeah, 3 of them are alive, 2 are dead, even though we started with 4.
Well, yeah, because I only thought that there were 4. So
There
so
were,
I guess,
but then,
yeah,
so
maybe,
2 of them, two of them get it eventually. Two of them are still sort of in the bowels of the I can't remember what they even called it. No, the basement in chains, basically, right?
Yeah.
Um, So let me see here. One of the things that, and again, it's just things that kind of stand out for you. I found it kind of weird later on in the book where she kind of inherits or gets some new bodyguards. And then in that section, he starts constantly referring to these characters as the large bodyguards over and over and over and over and over again. They never get a name. And this is Mythony. This is how she thinks of them, is just the large bodyguards. They did this. The large bodyguards did that. She motioned to one of the large bodyguards to come over. Like, God, give them a name or find a different way to refer to them. And it stood out to me because he did the exact same thing, especially in this trailer, with the nerds. Oh, one of the nerds spoke up, like, because they're sitting in front of a computer, they're a nerd. One of the nerds did this, and one of the nerds brought this up on their computer, and one of the nerds said, it got a little old after a while, because you know, for a little bit of the book, he kept referring to these people in the exact same way, and it stood out because he wasn't using names. So the words large bodyguards and nerds, you know, was a little bit much for me. Just because it stood out, just because I noticed it.
That should have bugged me, but I missed it. I mean, I remember him referring to the nerds. The large bodyguards, it became invisible. You know what, I think I was really in, like, that was a kind of a climactic part of the story for me, and I had read it twice like you. So for me, I was just wow, turning the pages and getting into it. So I think that's probably why it didn't irritate me, but I usually notice repetitions like that.
So you mentioned, Michael, that you liked Gestalt, which is just one of many characters in the book with different sort of superpowers or mutations, I guess is probably a better word. But what did you think of were there any other powers or abilities that kind of stood out for you that we hadn't really seen before or were done in an interesting way?
I thought Lady Farrier was interesting.
She was cool, yeah.
You like the ability to go into other people's minds. You know, I think the one character whose abilities I just didn't really care for, honestly, were probably Mythony's. Like the whole idea that you can touch someone and kill them or
control their nervous system. I
thought it was interesting, but I guess it struck me too close. I thought of Rook from X-Men, right? You know, she touches you, and drains your energy, and I don't know. I
kind of like that. I also like the way that he didn't explicitly say this, but it becomes more and more clear throughout the book that, because it becomes more and more clear that Mythony in her original incarnation was kind of a wimp, kind of, you know, scared of everything, and she had these powers, was afraid to use them, but then the new her was not only not afraid to use her powers, but discovered that there was much more to them than anyone had previously thought, because she was so afraid to explore her powers and learn about them. The new Mythony kind of was able to take it to the next level and affect people without even being in the same room with them.
Right.
And yet, one thing that was kind of interesting, and I don't know if either of you remember, and I think it would be a great way to kind of sort of flesh out her powers in the next book. In the book, the original Mythony refers to when she's losing her memories, and what she did is she said something like, I changed my brain, like I
reprogrammed it or something. Yeah,
reprogrammed. I did something, and we never found out what it was that she did. We just assumed it was cool. And we never found out all the way to the end of the book. I'm like waiting to find out. See, this is what I thought. Check this out. It would have been a really cool alternate universe ending, that she was the grafter agent all along, and rather than live with that guilt that she'd betrayed her country because she wanted to save her sister or something like that, she basically reprogrammed her brain to think that there was this purple binder that she could look in. So that's why when she's looking at the purple binder, it's got all this great storytelling and everything, and it's all like way too thick of a purple binder that anybody would just leave behind, you know? So I thought maybe I thought the twist was that she was the grafter agent all along, and she had implants all through her, and they took them out, and her memory came back, and all this other stuff, you know? So,
But it wasn't quite so crazy as that, though.
Well, he's got a couple more books to explore. Who knows, right?
So
I want to know what that thing was that she did. So,
and maybe what she did was reprogrammed her. I don't know. I was going to guess maybe she reprogrammed it to sort of enhance her powers. I don't know.
yeah, maybe something.
Were there any characters that stood out for you that you'd like to see explored more in book 2? I have mine.
Alric.
That's mine too. I would like to see a lot more about him. He's very cool. Michael, you?
Gestalt, if he comes back.
Mm-hmm. So Alric,
Yeah.
I actually would pronounce that in my head as Ulrich, but who knows?
Okay.
But anyway,
the Welsh, who knows,
he's and they're very coy about it through the entire book, but it's pretty clear very early on that he is a vampire. You don't explicitly find that out until later on, but that's more because she's too stupid to figure it out. The reader knows right away. But that was one piece of backstory that I really enjoyed was her writing of the how he became a part of the organization and his whole family. That I thought was pretty cool, and I think he could do a lot.
Cool.
He could do a lot more with vampires in this book because they're different, frankly, than any other vampire I've ever read before.
Yeah, they. Well, I'm gonna hold back one spoiler. The way they get their origin is very unique as hell. How about that?
Yeah, for sure.
So.
Some of the let me see here. I had a couple other things. One of them, a note that I kind of had for myself. So having read the book a few years ago, I would have thought that the foreshadowing that's placed early on in the book, that I would have caught it and remembered it. And honestly, there's two pieces of foreshadowing that happened that completely flew by me, and they were sort of, I think, kind of brilliantly placed. Kind of how you want foreshadowing, where when it comes back around towards the end of the book or 2/3 through or wherever it does, that you're like, oh, of course, I should have known, I should have seen that coming. That sort of, it couldn't have happened any other way sort of thing, right? And you kind of wonder if the author knows that they're going to do that from the beginning, or if it's something that he wrote his character into a corner and was like, how the hell am I going to get them out of this? Oh, well, if she only had this thing in her pocket, okay, so now I have to go back to page 3 and seed that shit into the story, or if it, like I said, or if it, if you wrote it that way from the very beginning, so that sort of thing that she has, and the heart should have, because that's just briefly kind of mentioned and then thrown away, and then it comes back later on to be not like a world-shattering big deal, but a big deal nonetheless. So I think he did that very well.
And by the way, one thing we haven't really mentioned, I don't think, is we haven't mentioned the humor of the story. It's not a serious story. It's got some serious stuff, but it's a very tongue-in-cheek, silly, very Simon R. Green, The Night Side, if you've ever read that. Kind of like Supernatural World, kind of dips in and out of serious. And also read a little bit like Bridget Jones's Diary, chick lit kind of stuff a little bit, with her clothes and how she's got this horrible wardrobe and she doesn't have any boyfriends, and
that's a
she
good
wishes
point,
she was
actually.
tall like Shantae or whatever her name was.
That was another character I liked. I like Shantae.
Yeah. Her
American counterpart. That's something else that I'm sure they'll get into. And, we've mentioned the grafters a few times, so they are, and I think, you were saying you found Gestalt disturbing, Michael. I think the whole grafter thing is pretty disturbing.
They were interesting. Yeah. Like the different creatures that they came up with. Yeah, that was kind of disturbing too, but
that's the kind of thing too where this is a world that he could, if he wanted to, go back and delve a little bit more into some of that history. He kind of told it already, but he could go back and dive a little bit deeper into some of those stories if he wanted to, other stuff that was going on, hundreds of years ago.
That I think those were some of my favorite parts of the book. And you brought up a good point, John, about how it did when I was reading it, I didn't think about it, but then when you mentioned that was kind of like Bridget Jones' Diary, that is kind of accurate, like except 1,000 times better than Bridget Jones' Diary. I think we've
I
already
love
had that
Bridget Jones'
conversation.
Diary.
Yeah, not my favorite book. Well, yeah, we think we talked about that already, but
Here's the thing,
um,
too. The author is a guy, and he's
yeah,
writing this sort of chick story. And I actually think that she didn't have any boyfriends or romantic things going on is because I don't think guys can pull it off very easily. You know.
I thought it was well written. I mean, if I hadn't looked at the book and known that it was a male writer, I would have been convinced that
Yes.
a female would have written it. I thought that was really convincing. I mean, it didn't. It wasn't anything that's like, oh no, he didn't get females right. I mean, not being a female, I guess I wouldn't know that, but like at no point did it ever feel like, okay, this is a guy very clearly trying to write about a female. Like it felt really organic to me.
With
And
the
Speaking
yeah,
of the organicness of it, I think that his portrayal of every single character in the book was very singular and well done. Like you knew every character's personality, you knew how they were different than the others. Because she told the story of like, oh, like um, Gummins is like this, and this is where he came from, and Eckhart is like this, and the fact that I even know their stupid names afterwards should tell you something because I don't remember names
yeah.
ever.
And what was really
like
effective about
Ingrid, I
that is
like
that,
that's another
Ingrid
character
was
that I
great.
liked. Yeah.
yeah. I was gonna say what was really effective about that though is that he did almost all of that with the letters
Hmm.
while introducing the backstory. So like with Gestalt, for example, you knew everything about Gestalt before he even really before Miffany really meets him, and I thought that was really effective. Like
It's a great
I felt like I knew the characters before they entered the screen, and that made the interactions with Miffany much more
right because she's prepping
richer.
herself by reading about them before she meets them, right? So yeah, that's a great.
Exactly.
It was a good. Again, a way to not just introduce backstory, but the characters too. And as far as the writing goes, because we write and tend to notice some of these things, there was like a 2 or 3 page block that I was flipping back and forth because what stood out to me was so within a couple pages, and I wrote these down because I noticed them all of a sudden in this sort of condensed, like I said, 2 or 3 page section where he used the phrases said apologetically, gesturing helplessly, nodded reluctantly, said Miffany testily, and said Emily hastily, all in a very short period. And I was reading, I was like, oh my god, like they again, something that just kind of stood out when I was reading it, and it was weird because it it didn't jump out at me through the whole book. So I don't think he was. I think he hit this block where he just went crazy with the ly words.
With the Swifties,
Hmm.
what we call them. Yeah, yeah. I noticed. I noticed
Swifties, yeah.
those. Yeah, I noticed those too. But
And it
speaking
didn't
of the
detract from
writing,
the book, really. I mean, again, it's
no,
just
no,
we're nitpicking here.
That's
no,
the strength of
exactly.
the
And
story. So
no, and I was going to say with the writing, something that I had noticed that I had alluded to a couple of weeks ago was how good the writing actually was. Like it was, I felt like it was a very plain conversational sort of style, but I think that's where that's where the merits were because when I was reading it, I remember reading the opening and the openings of each of the chapters and how well the author gets into the character's head, like particularly with the five senses. So particularly in the opening chapter, you get a sense of what Miffany's going through. She has no idea who she is. There's all these people lying dead around her. She's going to all these various places, following the string of the letters, and like I thought that was really effective because I've taken courses with Dean Wesley Smith, and that's one of the things he talks about is that the hallmark of a good opening and a good character is a character in a setting with a problem, but the reader sees everything through the eyes of the character, and taking away her memory and letting the reader go on that journey with her, I thought was excellent.
And
And I don't know what you guys thought about the writing, but I enjoyed it.
I was just going to say too that the feed froze up for me there for a minute. I don't know if it did for you guys.
no, I was fine.
Okay, good.
Oh,
So,
sorry about that.
so hopefully, no, I wasn't sure if it froze on my end or whatever, but hopefully that caught all the audio because I missed probably about 15, 20 seconds of what you were saying.
Oh
but
boy.
I caught the gist.
Cool. Yeah, I really enjoyed the writing on this one.
So did I. I will definitely be checking out the sequel. One other thing that I had noted was a little disappointed that there was this little scene where she is kind of madly pushing papers over in her office, and the piece of paper that she needs to see in that moment right then that reveals to her who the traitor is just kind of happens to flutter down on the floor, and she notices it and goes, aha. I know who the traitor is. That was a little cheap, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah,
Um,
He
heavy-handed.
had to end the book. He had to end the book somehow.
oh my god, it's 400 pages already. I got to wrap this. Got to wrap this up.
I forgive stuff like that all the time. Because it's like having been there. It's like you got to get to the end of the book somehow, and that's a pain. You got all this wonderful book behind you, and like you're just facing this horrible, spiky, poison-tipped wall. And it's just coming at you.
I'll
Like,
just have Superman fly around the Earth so fast that he turns time backwards, and there are problems.
exactly. It's
Yeah.
really horrible.
Well, it's a lot more forgivable if it's at the end of the book than at the beginning, right? At least for me. But yeah.
Hey, did you notice in the book, by the way, that first off, the entire book is told from Miffy's perspective, even though it's third person, except for a tiny weird spot sort of in the beginning where they're going to go to court for the first time, and we switch over to a couple of people's points of views, like Gummins is twisting himself up on his keyboard, and he's getting ready to leave. And I was so confused. I'm like, what the heck is going on? And they switched a couple of points of views, and they never ever did it again. Or he never did it again. It always stayed with the main character throughout the rest of this rather large book.
In thinking back to that scene that you're talking about, don't recall it not being from her point of view, so I didn't notice the switch.
I noticed it. There was a section where it jumped into a couple other characters' head. And I didn't think anything of it. I noticed it, but it didn't pull me out of the story.
It wasn't a problem because books do that. But what's funny to me is he never did it again. It only happened, I mean, you could almost imagine, I've seen people do it sort of near the end of a book, like you switch over to the bad guys or something like that quickly, but it's like there's something called director's promise, where you show something in the beginning of a script so that oh, okay, this is a rated R book or script because they use the F word on the first page, So the director's promise in this was that it would be like kind of a head-hopping type book, and it didn't happen. Not that I'm disappointed, but I just thought it was interesting from a writer's perspective.
Interesting, the different things that we all catch while we're reading this, while we're reading. So any sort of final comments while we wrap up our discussion of the Rook? I will definitely be rereading it. I haven't pre-ordered the sequel yet, but I'm sure I will be for my Kindle, and I think we'll probably have to get a physical copy too, because my wife will want to read it as well.
I want to read it.
Good book choice, Patrick.
Yeah, it was.
Good.
But I'm wondering about the how's he going to handle it without that purple binder? Like, what is he going to do now? Purple binder isn't there anymore.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see where he goes. Hopefully he can pull it off. Yeah, hopefully it's not just more of the same, right? Which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but and hopefully he also doesn't feel the need to be gimmicky with it. And the letters and the memory loss and all that wasn't necessarily a gimmick. That might not be the right word to use. But it would be disappointing if he started book 2 with her losing her memory again, and right, and he needs to tell a good story without using the same gimmick or hopefully any gimmick at all. But we'll see.
Yeah, plot device, I'd rather say.
Yes, there you go. So that's our discussion, our first sort of monthly shared book read. In February, we're going to be reading a book that was chosen by one of our listeners, Amber, on Goodreads, and she asked us to read the Zodiac Legacy. Book 1 is called Convergence, and this is written by Stan Lee and Stuart Moore. So we'll be reading that this month and talking about it in our first episode in March. So we're looking forward to that. And then I think after that, we're down to Midshipman's Hope, John's favorite book of all time, I believe.
Favorite space opera. Yeah.
Favorite space opera. There we go.
I encourage the listeners to well, obviously read all the books that we talk about, but I would love to see what other people think of this, because it's kind of an old book. I met the author when he was still alive. I recommend it to everybody who's got a pulse. So.
And just out of curiosity, Michael, have you picked?
I have, actually.
You have? What are we going to do?
I have.
April.
I would like you guys to read, and I'll be reading this along with you, The Best of Cage Baker. This is a book I'd mentioned on the show maybe over the last summer, but I didn't read it. But she's a science fiction author, and she writes these, it's like science fiction, vampires, time traveling. It's pretty interesting, but this is, it's the best of, so it takes place in this universe of The Company, which is what it's called, but it's different short stories and novellas. So, yeah, I think that'll be interesting. Yeah, she passed away before her time, so this will be a good book to read.
Okay, we'll put that on the books for April. So with that, we'll wrap things up and say goodnight. So hope you guys have a great week, and we'll be back next Tuesday. Take care, everyone.
Take care, guys.